Hello, my name is Brent, and tonight I'm doing a video and I'm trying something new. That is, I've done Facebook Live in the past, and tonight I am going to try YouTube and see how this thing works out. Um, my talk tonight is to deal with relationships, and that means simply is do not play games in relationships. Be honest and true. And those who do this, that is playing games in relationships, lead to hurting not only the person you're playing games with, but it's actually being childish in the way you treat one another. I'm older than most people. I'm 60 years old, and men today and women tend to choose to play games as though people's feelings don't mean anything. And if you're going to do that, you need to you need to check in with yourself and find out who you really are. There's no sense in you trying to prove something or boost your ego or whatever you want to do to try to make you feel secure. My thinking is, why do people do that? Why do people tend to use others? I think it has to do with insecurities with a person. Some of this should have been discovered much younger, when you were in your 20s, and actually decide, okay, this is what I want in a woman. This is what I want in a man. This is what I desire. And a lot of people just don't grow up. They just don't. So there are insecurities, and they may have seen this with how relationships take place with their parents. They may think that this is how you relate to someone, and that's actually feasible, because that's how we learn a lot of things we do in anything in life, and how we communicate is through our parents. And we assume that they're doing things right at a young age. We assume that loving someone is treating someone with respect. The problem is simply is there are very poor families now. I'm thinking in my day of time, my parents were I'm sorry, were married in 1954. The strange thing is my parents, my mother was, let's see, she was 18 years old, and my father was 3 years older. He was 23. My parents chose to, my mother had a miscarriage the first time. I don't know when that was, but in 1960, I appeared on the scene in April. So that meant simply is my parents did something that that I discovered with me and my brother, and this is a issue that told me a lot about my parents after they both passed away. They basically had sex on their anniversary, and my mother got pregnant both times. Now, I don't know what took place with my parents. That's really beyond that. But the point simply is, I discovered that my mother got pregnant with me apparently in 1959. That is probably August. My parents were they were married in 1954, August 14th. So I'm assuming in that period. One of the wise things that my parents did, they waited My mother was 18, so when they got married, and what took place was simply as she waited till she was 20, 24 or 25 years old to have children. So that was, to me, was responsible in waiting a longer period of time. But the sad fact is simply is that me and my brother were born a year and a day apart. Not a wise decision, meaning that there should have been more time between the firstborn and the secondborn, meaning that simply there should be at least a parent, I would say three or four, well, at least 3 years, if not a little longer. It caused issues with me and my brother. That is to, what's the word? Be very competitive. Probably also, there's a picture of me with me and my brother, and this is on a bed. My mother took the picture of us, and I'm sitting up in the bed, on the bed, and I'm seeing something here. I'm like, who is this? And that's my brother. And I'm like, the picture shows my feelings towards this newborn baby, which is my brother. And there's a sense of, who the hell is this? So what I mean by that, I was primary. I was number one. I was taking care. I wanted to be treated number one. In other words, you can't do this. There's a sense of jealousy. That's what took place. How dare you have another child, and now you're going to pamper him instead of me. So these are just mistakes people can make. Now, I kind of got off tangent here in some ways, but the point simply is that these are things that you need to consider before basically you're getting really serious with a woman or a man, and these priorities and why. One is simply to not play games with one another. Also, that a trick that women do and men do is to try to gratify themselves. And so they will sometimes, what I call, 2-time or 3-time someone. In other words, they will be seeing someone else, which is fine in a dating relationship. But once things get serious, you need to stop it. You need to decide who you're going to be serious with or not. You really do. Because it helps you to understand that simply is that, okay, you're my focus now. You're the one I'm interested in now. And so I can discover more about you and see if you're the right person. It's kind of hard to do that when you're seeing 2 people. So with this taking place, it's the possibility simply is that you are not being real. A lot of it deals with what I call being your ego. Your ego is, I know this for a man, okay? I know this with me, okay? That it's kind of an ego thing. Well, I've got 2 girls. And I'm, Mr. Studman here. And I just want to kind of play this game and feel like I'm the hot man here, type of thing. So, but the problem is you're not being true to not only yourself, but you are not being true to the other people you're seeing, the 2 women you're seeing. And this is basically, you learn these things, you screw up basically at a young age, but by the time you're 30, before then, in fact, you need to stop it. Okay, you just need to stop it. You also should have a good feeling of what you want in a relationship. Like, for example, uh, you have principles, you have what I call character. In other words, you're gonna basically say, I'm not compromising in this issue, period. In other words, I'm not gonna date someone who's in drugs. I'm not gonna date someone who's in alcohol that is, I could sense that they're alcoholic. I'm looking for someone who's gonna compliment me. In other words, if as I am, I'm an extrovert, and I'll pick up the ball and I'll run with it. I don't need another extrovert. Or I don't need another person that's going to talk me to death, because I'm the one that tends to do the talking. So I'm looking for someone who will listen, so that compliments me. Now you think these are very common sense, but the problem is simply when you don't have a family, you don't have a good background. Most people don't know this. Maybe a boy sees his mommy and daddy one day together, and then he sees another man there later on. Now, what kind of signal is that sending to the boy or girl? See, children are looking at this and they're saying, they're thinking you're doing this as a way. This is real life to them. So they cannot define it. They can't determine what is right and wrong is going on here, because they're really young. I'm talking, talking less than 6 years old, maybe even more than that. And so the signals you're sending to the child are detrimental to them, because they pick up on that and they think that's the way life is supposed to be. Or they see a lot of violence in the relationship between their mommy and daddy, which creates insecurity for that child. It also causes them in some ways to see this as a way to not only be insecure, but also to kind of cover your head and say, oh, so this is not happening. So it's basically, I don't want to face reality. We know that, as I being a Christian in the past, and those who are non-Christians and Christians, the statistics should show a big difference between divorces and relationships. They don't. So there's something else here deeper going on. Apparently, Christianity has no impact upon people, or there never was any difference in the first place. So when I say not playing games, I mean simply being honest in a relationship. That's what I mean. Some other things you need to look at in a relationship simply is how each partner you're dating, how they deal with how to deal with money, how to deal with stress. That tells you a lot about people. How you spend your money. Do you spend it and throw it away on frivolous things that are? And when you're younger, you tend to do that. I'm not blaming people for that. I'm just saying simply is that, you will spend money that way because you think you will have it the next day, type of thing, working type of situation. And I did that when I was younger. So I can't, blame people for such and such with that. But I also know simply is that when you get older, you don't do that. You just don't. And how do people deal with stress in stressful situations? That determines how they handle things. Do they lose it? I mean, really lose it. And what I mean by, do they blame others, or do they take responsibility in what they do? I know something that stood out to me many years ago, and I found it to be really a poor excuse for a mom. This happened in a drugstore, and this must have been probably, I bet you've been over 20 years ago. And it was a mom with a boy, that is a child. And the boy decided to basically, lack of a better word, use the restroom on the floor. And the mom would say, well, that's just the way boys are. No, that's not the way boys are. You're setting, you see, this is key, simply is you're not showing what I call a responsibility in training a child in the right way. So you're saying to that child, you can do whatever you want to do. And so it sets a dangerous precedence for the child and the mother. And I think that stood out to me. That stood out to me when I was probably 28 something years old, because I thought, how ridiculous. Why would you allow a child to do that? That was your responsibility to basically, quote unquote, to guess what? To take care of that child and take him to the bathroom. And so it's critical that people, you set the agenda as a parent. You set the agenda also in relationships too. And if you don't, then someone else is going to set the agenda. And I feel that men should set the agenda. I think that men should be leaders. They're not everything that men do well. Some men don't do well with a checkbook. You better find a woman that knows how to handle the checkbook, because you're going to be in trouble if you marry someone that doesn't know how to handle the checkbook, yourself. You see, that's to deal with money issues. And money issues are critical in relationships. In fact, over half of the divorces are to do with money issues. So, and I'm looking at something here. See, quantum generator. For a lot of women, marriage is like landing a dream job. Then a couple years later, demanding half ownership of the business that hired you. Interesting. A different perspective. Yes, men have to work to build value. Women have to maintain value. Okay. I'll write those things down. Maybe we can talk about those another time. But I do see this simply as that that people. Yes, I would agree that women do see. Actually, I would say this quantum generator. I would say basically that women's big day is the wedding. That's the big day. I remember going to a church wedding, many church weddings, and they were. This is serious. This was at least 15 years ago, probably 20 years ago. That the family, that is the girl's family, would spend $30,000 to $40,000 on a wedding. So you see, this is, and I think this is what I call the Barbie doll perspective that women can have, is that they are so keyed up in getting married at a wedding, so their perspective is not long term. And so what happens simply is that the wedding is like a peak deal. In other words, it's the crescendo or whatever it is, and it sets up what I call simply as a possibility of failure. And more possibility of failure. And I know a guy and a girl were dating, got pretty serious, and it was pretty much a expensive wedding. And they really didn't know each other. Apparently, both sides either played games or either chose not to be real. So when they got married and everything, suddenly the handwriting was on the wall. And I think I think what happened was simply is this was a guy I knew who went to seminary. And in a matter of 6 or 8 months, they were already divorced. So there's, those who are in the church are no better than those who are outside the church. Both, and I think this is more family related. I think it's to do with what I call what they grew with, and the Barbie doll type of perspective. And the men, they saw their perspective with what I call with their mothers. And so they thought that was the way it's going to work. So in other words, they were seeing their mothers as being a characteristic of what they wanted in a wife, or how they reacted and acted with the son. And so the son assumed that was the way it was going to be also, in a marriage. And you don't, what's the word is you how to say this? You better ask a lot of questions in a relationship and what their values are. Plus, the key, I think, a lot of times simply is to do with what is her expectations in a marriage and what is your expectations in a marriage. If there's not continuity there's not closeness in a mesh, then and you both sides have got to be honest with each other, so they can't play games. If they're playing games, they're going to be in a sad situation on both sides. One's going to lose probably just about everything. Usually that's the man. That's how justice is dealt with. I'm not saying that women are always bad. That's not my point. But that seems to be the way justice is done these days. And men today have a sour disposition about marriage because of what's happened to them. I'm not saying women don't either. I'm not taking sides here. That's not the point. So it's critical that you talk about these things. So when you talking with someone, what is your expectation in this relationship? And I think it's key simply is that when you're talking with someone in dating relationship, so what do you want in this relationship? Okay. What do you want to get out of this relationship? What are your hopes to build here? You see? And if you don't agree, you need to back up and say, wait a minute here. We need to talk about these things more seriously. And that's why you need someone who's honest. And if you're not honest in a relationship, one side or the other is not being honest, that's going to cause a dilemma, because basically either the guy needs to figure out what's going on, or the woman needs to figure out what's going on and have some discernment and saying, wait a minute, this is not the right guy, or this is not the right girl per se. And it's critical that you do these things. And I think it's imperative that both sides be forthright. And forthright simply means telling the truth. And if you don't do that, you're not going to have a solid foundation. There's no way. There's no way. If both sides are quote unquote not being real and being honest with one another, they're not going to have a happy trail. And I'm not saying that even if there are telling the truth, it's going to be a happy trail. There's going to be always issues in a relationship. It's how you handle those issues too. And if you don't handle them real well, then you're going to be in a sad situation. You really are. So I got some questions here. Landing on drink dogs. See, women give women horrible advice because it's based upon emotions, magic, and fantasy. Yeah, it could be. In some ways, that's positive. In some ways, it's negative. I think women can be. There's nothing wrong with them dreaming. I think that men can do the same thing. Thinking. I think this is key. Both are having high expectations that everything's going to work out okay. So it's not based upon reality. It's based upon high expectations. I think that if you have high expectations in a relation or anything, there's a possibility of always having a downer because that person didn't meet what you thought. And that's, I think the perfect way to build a relationship here also is developed first by friends. It has to be based on friendship. It cannot be based upon what one looks like or you're turned on by this person, such and such. Once you get married, you're going to find out simply is that the man is not what he claims to be. He's not picking up the laundry like he should, or the woman is disorganized, both ways. See. So anyway, I didn't want to go over 25 minutes, and I've already gone over 25 minutes. So over 27 minutes. This is just something I'm sharing. I think it's just critical for people to understand. I'm 60 years old. I've never been married. I'm just being honest. I've never been married. I've never found the right person, or I didn't feel like I was the right person for the person, So there's got to be a mesh, and there has to be honesty. If there's no honesty in a relationship, it's not going to work. It will not. And then you're dealing with basically people who are kids. And the sad part simply is that somebody gets hurt in that particular situation, and it's a major hump for both sides. And probably both sides are equal in what I call the responsibility in some ways too. And what I mean by that simply is that they were not prepared. They were not prepared. If you had one other thing simply is, if there has to be what I call a spiritual dimension. In other words, that both are interested. If they're not interested in spiritual issues, then so be it. But if they are interested in spiritual issues, you need to be compatible in that area. If you are into being a Christian and you're both Baptist, fine, no problem. I understand that. We live in a belief system now. In the future, it will be Aquarius, so it will be a completely different perspective, and it will be simply we will know. And we're working in that direction. In other words, you will know. There won't be any excuse anymore. That's why karma is it will be part of it. It will no longer be grace and mercy as it's been in this particular age, in the Pisces age, but it will also be in the age of Aquarius, which will be karma. You're responsible. You will be dealt with that way in a very quick manner. Meaning that simply if you do someone wrong, you're going to get instant karma. Because you know what you're doing. You're not flying by the seat of your pants. You know. There's no excuses. So, okay. Well, I enjoyed it, sharing. I hope that I appreciate Quantum Generator here, sharing his input here. And yes, I agree. Let me say one more thing. I have disposable income, no debt, good health, no kids. what is missing from my life? Well, maybe, yeah, that's kind of the way I feel sometimes. Um, I think that that's a good comment, very much so. I'm probably in the same boat as you are. I have no debt. I have no kids. So in other words, haven't been playing around. So maybe, and sometimes it simply is, if you feel that way and you know that, then there's no point for you to get married. Really, there's no point. There's nothing wrong with being single. There's, for me, being single, I've been single for a long time in my life, that is, and I have, I can get up and go when I have a day off and go wherever I want to go. There's no one to ask. And there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're married, that's a different ballgame. It's, the other person comes first, or you definitely share that with the other one and say, well, you like to go here or whatever. But usually you won't wait to the last minute on that, truly. You will be prepared to do something of that nature. So I'm going to go. I appreciate it. It's getting late here on the East Coast. It's 1 o'clock actually here, and it's time for me to go to bed here. But appreciate the input from Quantum, and hopefully we can do this another time. And thank you.